Okay, so what is JPA? JPA stands for Java Persistence API. Now, this is the official API for working with relational data and Java. JPA is only a specification, it's not a concrete implementation, meaning that it is an API specification and there's other vendors to choose from. There's different implementations to choose from for JPA. So, what does JPA do? It is a bridge from Java's object world to how data is stored in relational databases. There's a different paradigm there. So it's known as an ORM tool, object relational mapping. And what JPA offers us Java developers is database independence. One API will support many different relational databases. So if you stick to the API, you should be able to hit just about any relational database. Now, JPA 2.0 came out under JSR 317, and this was approved in December of 2009. It added support for embedded objects and ordered lists, also criteria query, which is a really cool feature, and SQL hints is very important for larger data sets and validation. Now, JPA 2.1 came out under JSR 338, and this was approved in December of 2013. Now, this added a very important feature for custom type converters and also criteria for update and delete of bulk data in the database. So this is a pretty important feature to do these bulk operations. Also gave us a standard way to do schema generation and run queries against stored procedures. Now, for the JPA 2.1 implementations, Hibernate has 72% of the market share, while Eclipse Link has 13%, which is actually the reference implementation for the API. And then OpenJPA has just 2% of the market share. Now, some of the databases supported by Hibernate, obviously, it would be Oracle 11g, the granddaddy of all databases, DB2, SQL Server, Sybase, MySQL, Postgres. And then there's a lot of smaller ones out there like Apache Derby and Formix, even Microsoft Access. I hate Access. But we will be using H2 in this course as well. Now, Hibernate 5 came out in September 2015. Commercial support for Hibernate is available through Red Hat, which makes it very popular with enterprises. Spring Framework adopted it in version 4.2, and then Spring Boot came up in version 1.4. So you can see that there's a little bit of a lag from Spring Framework adopting it to Spring Boot adapting it. So in this course, we will be using Hibernate version 5 and higher, and we'll also be using Spring Framework 5 and Spring Boot 2. So that these are all using Hibernate 5, and we will be using that, which is a reference, or not the reference implementation. It is a implementation of JPA 2.1. Now, I want to point out that Hibernate does have its own extension, and there's Hibernate specific things that we can get into, and as much as possible, I am going to avoid those because I want to stick to the JPA specification, which is pretty feature rich. So we'll be sticking to try to stick to plain old vanilla JPA. So if in the future we ever wanted to switch our JPA implementation, we should be able to do so. So just like in this course, what you're going to see us do is develop against relational database. We'll start off with H2, but somewhere down the path, we will go against MySQL, and you'll see how seamless that will be, how easy it is, because we are using Hibernate, which gives us the database independence. All right, I've jumped over to IntelliJ, and I've created two POJOs, so just plain old Java objects. And the first class is author, and author has a first name and a last name, and he also has a set of books. So let's take a quick look at book. So a book has a title, an ISBN, and a publisher. I'm not even sure what ISBN stands for. That's an industry standard for identifying books. And a book also has a set of authors because obviously a book can have more than one author, and likewise, an author can have more than one book. So pretty simple relationship here. And right now, this is pure object-oriented programming. It's just two POJOs that are related to each other because they share a common set. So author has a set of books and book has a set of authors. So nothing too earth-shattering here. And what we're going to do is convert these into JPA entities. Now, the first thing that we need to do is annotate the classes as an entity. And we do that with the entity, And we can see that two annotations are coming up there in IntelliSense, and we want the Java X persistence, and that is the official JPA API that we are using. So we definitely want to be using that, not the Hibernate specific ones. And I'm going to do the same thing for book. You can see IntelliJ is trying to bring up the Hibernate one, which we do not want. And it looks like it's been deprecated anyways. So now we've marked both of those as entities. So these are going to show up as JPA entities, but we're not quite done yet. One thing right now, the problem is we don't have a unique way to identify these in terms of persistence. So first name, last name, you could have more than one author with a first name, last name. So we need to add in some type of unique identifier. So what I'm going to do is add in a new property, a long property. And now that you don't need to use long, I'm just going to call it ID. And I'll go down here and add in a getter and setter for it. And I'm just doing command new on OS X at least. And so now I have a getter and setter for that property. And this is what's known as leakage from the ORM, from the relational database, up into the object layer. Because truly in an OO world, we don't care about an ID value, but here, when we persist it, we need to have some type of unique identifier there. So this is a little bit of leakage between relational and the object-oriented paradigm. Now what we need to do is tell JPA that this is an ID. And again, we are using the Java X persistence ID. And we are also going to tell it how to generate it. So we're going to say it's a generated value. And in this case, we are going to do strategy generation auto. And this would be both H2 supports this and MySQL supports it. I did try this in Oracle 12, and it wasn't quite working, but this was some time ago. They might have got the kinks worked out of it, so I don't think the Hibernate implementation was quite ready when I tried it. So I'm going to come over here, and I am doing a cut and paste just to expedite things. Remember, cut and paste is evil. You should not try that at home. And now I need to add in the ID as well, the getters and setters for it. So now I have that all set up. And now the last thing that we need to do is we've told it that we have a set, and what we want to do is tell JPA that we are going to have a many-to-many relationship here. So we're going to have a many authors to books, and also many-to-many for books to authors. So this is going to define that relationship, allowing that to get created in the database. Now, Hibernate is going to make some guesses for us, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up Spring Boot right now. So I've gone into IntelliJ, I'm running Spring Boot. Same thing as if I'd gone to Maven and done Spring Boot run. So we can see that it did come up pretty quick. And you can see some Hibernate chatter here saying that it has done an import, and it's actually gone in and created it on the fly for us. And there's a H2 database console available. And we are getting this error page because it used to be enabled by default, but it is not. So what we need to do is come over here. I left that in so you could see it. And I'm going to use IntelliJ's H2 or IntelliSense. And we can see that the spring.h2.console enable is false. I'm going to change that to true. And we'll restart things. So we can get that database console, because what I want to do is show you the in-memory database. So in the background, Spring has started up a H2 database for us. Let's come back over here. We'll test that. Now, the one thing when you're doing this is keep an eye on your JDBC URL. So you definitely want JDBC H2 mem testdb. If you have something else in there, and I think it's cached for me. I've had others get in trouble with this. I believe this is cached for some reason on my browser. I can go in and connect, but watch that URL. And now we can see what Hibernate has created inside of H2 for us. So we have author, author books, books, and book authors. So this is going to set up the relationships, and we probably want to tweak this because I'm not too happy with how this turned out. This is not a good database schema for us, but this is just using the default mappings, and we are going to definitely tweak that so that we have a better relationship and specify the join tables. But this is Hibernate's first guess on a very minimal JPA mapping for us. So I'm going to switch over now and correct that little problem that we have. So what we want to do is get rid of author books and book authors. These are auto-generated by Hibernate, and we don't want that behavior. So I'm going to toggle over here to IntelliJ, and the first thing I need to do is check author and say that he's mapped by, and saying he's mapped by authors. So this is going to be the target side. So we're creating a relationship to books for him. And the next thing we need to do, this is a little bit more complex because we only want one join table, not two, because we didn't specify any information. So Hibernate's trying to fulfill both ways of the direction, and we want to actually have a single table to define that relationship. So what we need to do is add in what's called a join table. And in this case, we're going to say name. So we're doing author book. So I'm going to toggle over to Chrome real quick, and you can see that it created author books and book authors, which is not what we want. So we're going to override that. And now we also need to tell it about joined columns. And we're going to say at join column. And what this is going to do, if we take a quick look over here, the way the default mapping in Hibernate worked is it's creating author's ID and book's ID. So we want a singular ID value there. So that's what's going to change that behavior. And then finally, we need to specify inverse join columns. So now I've got the column specified. So we're saying book ID and author ID to get those columns singular. And let's take a quick peek back over here once more so we can see I have the two join columns. So I'm specifying with these annotations, I want a single table. So let's go ahead and restart this now. And what's going to happen is Hibernate's going to restart and generate the schema DDL for us in the background based on our JPA mappings. It'll come up pretty quick. You can see that it's back up, and we are going to do a refresh here and see how our database has changed. And now we can see that we have author book and author book, and we have a single book ID and a singular author ID. So now we have a single relational table to define that many-to-many relationship for us. All right, that is a great introduction to JPA. In case you didn't know anything about JPA before, I hope this gave you a good solid overview. Now clearly we only covered the very basics of JPA. I'm trying to give you a very standard object relational model to work with, and we're going to work with this going forward and get this data, well actually put data in the database, and we're ultimately at the end of this section of the course we're going to get that displaying on a web page. But this is like the basics. Further down in the course, we are going to get a lot more into JPA and show you some more advanced features of using JPA mappings. But right now, we're just getting going, so I didn't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. We got a lot more to cover in this section of the course as far as getting data into the database and through a Spring MVC controller and onto a web page for us.